Loading. Me.
Have we got any official vocal exercises for the podcast?
We should think about them, shouldn't we?
A menagerie of I don't know. Something like that.
Okay. Welcome to Different Gravy, not just another Sheffield Wednesday podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, inventor of the phrase "eat, drink, get a buy against Berry," my friend and yours, Luke Gledall. How are you doing
Hi,
today?
Rich. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I've spent a week in Scotland. I've caught the accent, and I've also caught a cold. So these are if you put yourself out there, these are the sort of things that happen.
I see.
I will drop that fairly quickly, but it did make me think of just be exhausting to keep it.
We can't be faulted for our commitment on the podcast, can we?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. But there was a boy at school that just lied all the time, and he came back from a half term with a Scouse accent. So all of a sudden he was like full on like this sort of accent, and everyone was like, "What is going on with your accent? What accent? I don't have an accent. Maybe I spent some time with me because I'm from Liverpool, but that's all."
Excellent.
Yeah, he spent the whole day talking like that. And then another time he came in from a summer holiday, and he discovered that he was supposedly part Spanish.
Excellent.
And he put on all of his textbooks Stefanos Antonios Boswellos. His name was Stephen Anthony Boswell, but obviously it's very Spanish if you put os on the end. And he spoke like gibberish Spanish, like he'd get angry at the teacher with like a raised menage. Just ridiculous. Those were the days, Anyway, yeah. So you're well, Luke?
I'm okay, other than just had to battle the sounds of someone doing the lawn and behind my apartments. And I think I've just heard, I don't know if the listeners can hear, but I had to kick the cat out of the room. I haven't literally kicked the cat, and he's having a bit of a yowl session. So if those things don't come through in the recording, then I'm a very happy chap. But other than that, I'm all right, Rich. How are you?
Good. Yeah, fingers crossed. I've got windows open here as well because it's very warm. It's not producing any sort of breeze, but we won't complain too much about the heat because it's cold and wet for long enough, isn't it?
It is. It is, especially in my new country.
Yes. So do we have anything from our network?
We do. 99% Invisible. So WTF host Alman Abdi is having such roaring success with his show that he started another podcast, and he has so much time on his hands, seeing as he's still a free agent. So 99% Invisible, Alman Abdi interviews other Sheffield Wednesday players who've had very, very slight careers, including that Cardiff player we signed from Cardiff who had played for 13 minutes, whose name I can't remember. And that's the name of the first episode title. So if you can't remember who that player is, then tune in to the inaugural episode of 99% Invisible, including Iral Darling, Alman Abdi.
The interesting thing is I always step on the toes of the shows you're previewing, but he doesn't actually know his name, does he? He calls himself that lad from Cardiff.
He does, yes, he does, and that's part of the joy. That's part of the joy of it, because then he'll, it's a little bit like Through the Keyhole. We see their silhouettes, and we're not entirely sure who they are, and then you just slowly learn. Because I don't think anyone can remember that player who played for 13 minutes for us that we signed in the Brian Laws from Cardiff. I remember he's some more clues, but I don't want to step too much on the toes of this podcast.
No,
he was Northern Irish.
Ah,
But anyway, if you'll have to learn more, you'll have to either develop some brilliant elephant-like memory for mediocre Sheffield Wednesday moments, or listen to the episode.
Well, I'd advise people to listen to the episode, to subscribe. I think really it's such a kite mark of quality being on the Year Out Network that you can pretty much subscribe to any podcast. You're going to have a good time.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna go out there and say it. So that leads us beautifully into
breaking hoo-hoos.
Breaking hoo-hoos for this week. Bit more of a slight week this week in terms of news. But
a couple of lone departures.
We spoke about Matt Penney on the podcast previously as a left back option over time, but he's joined the mustachioed Dutchman himself, Joost Lukai, at St. Pauli. So he's going to be doing his left wing work over there in Bundesliga 2.
Yeah, which is incredibly interesting, and interesting that Jos was such a big fan of him that he wants to take him on to his next adventure, and for the rest of the season, which we'll see out his Sheffield Wednesday contract as it stands from Matt Penney. So, interesting one. I saw there was a reference, but I was a little bit lazy and delayed and busy with a few other things. I saw that Lee Bullen made a comment or was interviewed about the future of Matt Penney.
Yes.
But I'm not entirely sure. Do you recall what he said, Rich?
He said we're considering him part of the future of the football club. So, whatever that means.
Right. So I feel that is someone who we'd probably keep an eye on his progress and then potentially give a new deal to if it looks good.
Yeah. I mean, this is how the loan market is supposed to work. We can't really afford to take a risk on him. This lets him go make his mistakes somewhere else, and hopefully if he comes back to us, he comes back as a more rounded player.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm just a little bit behind with in terms of kind of our practice as a football club still, and this nature of FFP, and I don't know, we seem very reactionary to the futures of players. Like there's no great tactics. It's not like, hey, we think you're a fantastic future player, sign this whopping great 2-3 year contracts, spend the first year on loan, at X club, and we will look at your progress. Like this is the rest of his contracts.
His route was pretty strange anyway, wasn't it? Because he had a couple of good games. Then it looked like he was kind of going down the George Hurst route of, I've got a little modicum of a name now, and I'm going to see where this takes me. That might be Sheffield Wednesday, but it might not be. It might be somewhere else. And then I think eventually he did get signed up, but then he fell out of the first team picture. He had an injury. Was it a shoulder injury?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think since that injury, it's really been a question of where he actually stands in terms of the squad. Because I think before the contract negotiations, you would have said, well, this guy is borderline first team. That's the way he was looking. And then the dispute seems to have derailed things, derailed his momentum pretty much entirely. Add the injury to it, it's like it all kind of came to a halt. And it is hard to see where he stands in things now. As you say, it's not a usual thing to send someone out on loan for the entirety of the remainder of their contract. That's not a normal thing to do. But it might be that it's 2 years with a year extra. Who knows?
It could be, because I think the deal we signed with him was like 18 months, because it was he was out of contract, last summer he would have been, because it was like January time, wasn't it, that all this stuff was going on. And no, actually, I guess it was like October, November that he had some decent performances
Yeah.
It was under the time of Yoss, and and there was a lot of agent talk and potential newsprint batting their eyelashes at new clubs and new futures. Aston Villa seems to apparently been interested, which seemingly was against him having an absolute stormer against Aston Villa.
Yeah.
And was it the game? Was he fantastic in the game? Was it the one that Sean Clare was also fantastic in? The one where we lost? Was it 4-2?
He was good in that one, but I think his kind of coming out performance was maybe the away leg against them. But I might be muddling things up.
Yeah, there's such and as covered in 99% Invisible, there's such a blinding corridor of mediocrity which you forget as supporting Sheffield Wednesday. even fans as passionate as ourselves, Rich, there's stuff that just completely forgets us. I still can't remember. I think it was Times. You remember when we signed Sei Oli Finjana?
Oh yes.
And I remember Steve Howard. And I remember there was also some kind of left back, left midfield player we got from Leeds on a short term contract, and he was okay. He was good. We got enough mileage out of him, but then it was like he's too old. He's going, and I cannot for the life of me remember his name. So that's the point I'm trying to make. There's some real chaff. There's some real terrible stuff in recent history.
Do you think is that just we have sort of risen above it, or do you think it's just stopped? Because it doesn't feel like those random loans happen quite so much.
Yeah, I guess there's probably less random loans these days, I think. I see the point you're getting at. It's an interesting.
We seem to bounce from one to another. So I think the sort of great game that Penney had. Sorry, just to come back to it. So we won 2-1 at Villa, and I think he played the whole game, maybe.
And that wasn't the one where me and you saw it in New York with the New York Owls.
Yeah, that one.
That one, the one with where we missed the Adam Reach early goal.
Yes.
Because we were thinking, it'll be all right. We'll be like 3 or 4 minutes late. It doesn't really matter. And then Flash Score told us otherwise.
They did. They absolutely did.
And then, and then I remember that was a great performance. And Jordan Rhodes scored as well, the second.
Yeah, a real rare occurrence.
And it was a good goal as well.
It was.
Obviously overshadowed by the
absolute
ball smashed in.
Yes.
Smashed in on a just a casual way by Mr. Adam Reach.
That's how he does it. So just looking at the 18-19 season, so Penney played. It looks like he was almost ever present till the end of November. So he played 17 times for us between the start of the season and the end of November. And I don't think he's and we won. We lost one of the last 2 games. We drew 0-0 with United. We lost to Derby, and we beat Bolton at home 1-0 in his last game.
Was that the one that my last game I was there present for? That was the one after we sacked. Was that one after we sacked Yoss?
Could well be. Could have. So that was maybe
Bullen's first game in charge of his second. He's done 3 caretaker spells, correct? This is his 3rd caretaker spell. Yes. Or again, am I just making things up because this, this hugely mediocre period of Sheffield Wednesday history?
Yes.
So that was, the first game of the second one, and I remember coming back and thinking nothing will happen. I was back for Christmas, and then Wednesday was like, oh, Chancery's finally pulled the trigger and fired Lukai, and we managed to see a Wednesday win. Yeah,
which was a real treat for you and a bit of a rare occurrence.
A rare occurrence in the season for yourself, yeah.
Yeah. But as far as I remember, it was the contract dispute then that meant he dropped out of the team rather than an injury at that point. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think the whole thing with Matt Penney. So we were fan of the wing backs, weren't we, under Yoss? Yoss really enjoyed his wing back switch. So Matt Penney was very good in the left wing back berth. He was very good there. Probably less said about Liam Palmer in the right wing back berth. He really wasn't very good in that aspect.
No.
Which, he's been a hell of a lot better as a right back in a flat kind of back four. And then there was obviously Ashley Baker as well, who was okay. He was okay. He didn't pull up any trees, didn't wow at all, but he was okay. So he was really good in that. Then I think it was a lot of experimentation with formations, and I think at one point they pushed Penney further up the pitch, which I think he started out, he was a winger. So I think it was technically should be more within his kind of wheelhouse, but he wasn't that good as opposed to when he was like the left wing back.
Yeah. So I don't quite know where he sits really in the pecking order. And then we've got Jack Stobbs, who's gone out on loan to Livingston.
Mm-hmm. And on his debut, he just thunder-twatted a rocket straight at the top pokey. And so I was wondering, Rich, whether you could try and get back a little bit of that cold Scottish brogue that you had, and you can just repeat that for our listeners and myself.
What exact phrase would you like?
The fact he thunder-twatted a rocket straight into the top pokey.
Oh, he absolutely thunder-twatted a rocket straight into the top pokey. Don't mind if I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Stobbs. Yeah.
You're very Jim White in your brogue, aren't you, Rich?
I've got all sorts of variations, It moves around.
Can you do it as Ken Bruce?
Oh, just laughing at myself because everything I say is a wee bit funny.
Twatted a rocket straight into the top.
Absolutely. He's wanged it into the top bin. I think it's fair to say he's never quite shone in a Wednesday shirt.
No,
Stops.
He's very much the Rocky Lukács of his time.
Oh,
a flat track bully in the youth team and reserves, but not making the step up into the first team picture.
Yeah.
I feel like this is definitely one of those. This is more Matt Penney's more of like we still think he could be someone who still could have a future at Sheffield Wednesday. This is more for Jack Stobbs, more like just
go make some waves and hopefully
go make some waves and
get yourself a contract somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, he's only there till January, so I suppose time will tell on that one. But a very good start for him.
This is good though. This is the type of. This is the thing I think we want to see a lot as fans. We want to see a lot of the youth team going out on loans. I hear a lot about how a lot of players are kind of limited by sometimes the money that we ask, even at a championship level club. So apparently it's actually deter a lot more kind of players going out on loan than we kind of hope.
I suppose, but I think everyone's sort of playing that game. That the bullying kind of gets passed down, doesn't it? Because Premier League teams are certainly very good at forcing teams to play their players. And I think that means that when we send players out on loan, we probably tend to use the same sort of tactics on them, I would think. Well, obviously there's different grades of player, but Uh, it's hard. It's hard to say from the outside looking in, but I know their clubs are sort of, they're not allowed to put penalties on players not playing, but they do sort of enforce penalties on players not playing because you pay different grades of wages quite often depending on if they start, if they play from the bench, or if they don't play. You pay different percentages of their wages normally. I know when Palmer was at Tranmere, and that was a long time ago now. So, but this still seems to be a pretty standard practice. But Tranmere paid half his wages if he played, and his full wages if he didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I know Ryan Kent had a similar deal when he's been on loan a few times. Liverpool are sort of notorious for, basically, if you take a Liverpool player, you better play them, otherwise you're paying the full weight of their fairly lofty. Yeah. It does make me wonder about Murphy, to be honest. Not to sort of point fingers.
Well, that could be. There could well be something in that when we get into summarizing the game that happened yesterday.
Yeah.
So I guess that's it for breaking hoo-hoos.
Neither of us were able to follow the Luton win particularly closely, unfortunately.
I was listening a little bit.
Okay.
At the time, I didn't want to, I was busy with my day job, so it didn't sound, the things that I heard afterwards, it was a very kind of uninspiring performance, worse in the first than it was in the second. But it's still 3 points.
Absolutely.
And 3 points that took us as of 10 p.m. on Tuesday night, top of the pops.
Yes, yeah. And is it 2 wins from 2 at home as well?
I think it is.
Which is not to be sniffed at all.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of I cast an eye over the highlights. It looked like both teams were sort of doing the high intensity pressing that seems to be the tactic du jour. Because their best chance was pushing Westwood into a poor clearance and him having to sort of race back and flick it over the top of his previously open goal. And obviously our goal came from Murphy pressing the straight from the throw out that the keeper did, and then putting a pretty good cross in for Fletcher, and Harris nudging it home with his gentleman's agreement. It was quite sweet to hear John Pearson on the commentary going, he's put it in with I think he meant that. Like very coy around the fact that just looks like he sort of nudged it home with his personal pipe.
And Kadeem Harris just gets better and better as a player, really.
Yes. Just amazing amount of energy and strength. Yeah, very impressed with him.
Mm-hmm.
So, without further ado, then, should we get on to yesterday's game?
Indeed, and I believe, Rich, you had the pleasure of being there yourself.
I was in attendance. A gorgeous, warm day. It was a good day for football, but it was hot, and I think we were a bit less intense with our pressing as a result of that, which is sensible because there was definitely one of those days where you could easily have worn yourself out and been sort of gasping for the last 10, 15 minutes. But yeah, no, it was good. I don't think I've got particularly good luck going to Deepdale. I've been a few times, and I don't think I've seen us win. So maybe I'm a bit of a joke Respect.
We haven't won there since 2011, I think.
Okay, so it's not just me.
No, I've also been there, and did I see us win there? Did we see us win there? Was that like?
Not sure. I just remember I've been there twice when Forestieri's been sent off.
That's pretty funny. Which is
Yeah.
why I think he has a bit of a reputation amongst
Yes.
the Preston fans.
So you were on an iFollow brief then?
I was watching from my bed as my usual 8 a.m. kickoff.
Very good.
As I also had up on my tablet, I had DAZN, which is a online sports network we have here in Canada. They for the first time this season they have the rights. So for the first time in history, they have the rights to all of the Premier League games.
Oh.
So I also had on the background Sheffield United losing to Leicester, which was quite fun.
Jamie Vardy celebrating in front of the Kop.
Indeed, him just absolutely lashing one into the roof of the nets, and then giving it the big one to the fan.
Good man. Good man. I loved seeing the pictures of him celebrating because it's just what we would all want to be doing in that situation.
Exactly.
Because they would have been giving him stick all game.
Yep.
So I think we sort of exchanged WhatsApp messages at half time, and we were on different pages in terms of how well we thought the first half had gone. I thought we just never looked like we got to grips with Preston at all, and I thought we were pretty poor. But you thought you were slightly more positive than that.
I don't know. I mean, just as a kind of overall recap, I mean, there are games that we will lose.
Yes.
There are teams who will come up again will be very difficult. Preston they're a very well drilled side.
Yeah, I think the main thing, not to get too sort of deep tactically, but we were playing broadly similar systems. But they allowed themselves to really. They dragged numbers from the wide positions to try and overwhelm us in the middle, and I think that was the story of most of the game, was that they just were able to kind of outpower us and outmaneuver us in the middle. And even though we obviously a big strength is our pace out wide now, and we were focused on trying to keep those players out there, but it meant at times it was 5 or 6 against our 3 in the middle because we were trying to keep our 2 wingers out on the wings. And I suppose there's a worry if we're not as good at it, we could take away from our own strengths at the same time as still losing out. We could have pulled those players in to try and sort of fight the battle in the middle and still lost out because we're not used to doing it and it's what they do. But I don't know how sold I am on that particular 3 in the middle, particularly away from home. I think Bannon and Hutch all too often bring the worst out of each other. We have spoken about this previously, and apologies if it's a bit of a broken record, but they both fight to be the deep lying guy picking out passes, and it means we've got so little actually in terms of forward pressure and momentum. And I don't know whether Bannon's too strong of a personality or a voice that he can't be told to play a different role, but obviously the natural person for that role is Hutchinson. He's got the defending aspects to his game. He's obviously taller, so in terms of just being a shield for the defenders, that's where, if he's playing, that's where he should play. But Bannon likes sitting in that hole as well, so they end up fighting each other for that sort of primacy in that position, and I think it hurts the whole shape of the team. It tends to mean, to be honest, that Bannon goes missing a lot or plays a lot of pointless passes that sort of bog down the play. And I also thought, I'm a little bit worried at the moment that Lee is starting to look a bit of a luxury player. We've all been really pleased at him coming back, and I think when we're absolutely sort of humming, he's going to be a guy that's, as we talked about, that honey to the soup. He's going to be a guy that joins all those pieces together in a way that's even more effective. But in a game like yesterday, which was more like sort of trench warfare in the middle, I just don't know what Kieran Lee's bringing to it, because he's kind of everywhere and nowhere. And
baby,
yes, exactly. I was very conscious saying that. But he does pop up all over the place. But that also means you can't depend on him to be in any one particular place. And
that's where he's at, Rich.
What's that? Sorry.
That's where he's at.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it just felt like we were going down this bumpy hillside. And then I'm like, where's my blooming hippie hat? On this day of all days.
Excellent. That was so good that you completely hoodwinked me that I didn't think that's what you were doing. And I was like, Rich, you're making another reference to the... So, yeah. Wow, I'm... It's about 10:50 a.m. here, Mountain Standard Time, and I'm still not really awake. So there we go.
It's nearly 6 o'clock here, and I'm not really awake, so it's fine. But yeah, I think you end up with Bannon and Lee both fighting, sort of running around the pitch trying to find a space where they work rather than playing a role and doing a job, which we touched on. Reach has actually done a pretty good. I think Reach knows what he's doing in that position, and he's more tactically disciplined than either of those two, and just kind of gets on with the job he's there to do. So I don't. That just felt like a bit of a problem in general, and it's also for me a bit of a worry going forward that feels like it's Bullen's favourite three, and I think more often than not it's not going to be the best three for us. Anyway,
yeah, well, I guess that's an interesting thing. So excuse me. Going into this game, I mean, this isn't something that I want to do every week.
No,
and I'm very sympathetic that we have a very big lineup. We have a very big squad. We've got a lot of professional football players at this club, and that's to a similar degree. That's how it should be. When everyone's fit, it's very difficult. It almost gets a little bit easier sometimes when you get players who are injured, because that helps you make decisions that you don't really want to make.
Yeah.
And so when I was looking at the lineup, it was just a little tink of surprise. I think, as everyone who's listened to the show knows, that Rich and I are very, very big fans of Greasy Bob. Greasy Bob himself, Adam Breach. So to see him on the bench, I was a little bit like, yeah, that's not the... I would have rather kept the middle three the same, and maybe dropped Murphy to the bench and brought Reach in. Or maybe you look to sacrifice one of Lee, Bannon, and Hutchinson for Reach, which is a really, really difficult situation to make. I would have much rather replaced Murphy with Reach, to be honest.
But then I suppose Murphy had second half against Luton looked like he had one of his better periods for us, and obviously
I think so. Yeah,
set up the goal. Had a header that he probably should have scored as well. So it is hard. These are difficult decisions to make. I think I would have wanted Reach on the pitch. One, because he's Reach, but also the fact he's got a history with Preston. More often than not, players kind of play a little bit better in that scenario. They want to show people what they're missing. He got his first goal for us against Preston, Reach, and I think he tends to do pretty well against them. Well, certainly, it doesn't always work that way. I remember Gary Medine being particularly bad against Carlisle every time we played them. But Reach seems to perform that little bit. There's that 2 or 3% more when he plays against Preston. For whatever reason, everyone's got an ego. Everyone's got to, have contacts at the club or whatever, that they just want to make sure they put in a good performance against them. Mm-hmm. And when he came on, he absolutely showed why he should have been on the pitch, because that cross, there's nobody else in the team can play a cross like Adam Reach played for our goal. Not one.
I completely agree. And the flip side of that was I was looking at the bench, and I'm like, on paper, that's an impeccably talented bench.
Very, yes.
So all this probably adds a little bit of honey to the soup of disappointments that I had for this game, because it's... So the thing I was going to say was, look, we're going to lose games, and often I think the only thing we can really attribute as fans is what we see in front of us in the performance.
Yeah.
And it wasn't terrible yesterday.
No, I will say I agree with you. Preston look a good team. They look well drilled. They know what they're about. They play off Stockley, and everything's kind of built around him as a kind of centerpiece, in a similar way to how we build around Fletcher. I mean, he's really a big part of how we come forward. But so the big moments really, though, were annoyingly self-inflicted. So Lees and Stockley were wrestling, which meant the ball just sort of bounced right over the top of them. Odebajo out of position, so couldn't clear it before it bounced in front of him, and that meant he was wrestling with his man in the box, and of course his man fell over, and they got a penalty.
It was just really upsetting to see, because I don't think there was any need to give anything in that situation.
No,
like we've said, Preston are a good team, but they're not the second coming of Barcelona. Like, I'm not going to do an Alan Irvine and make them seem to be, giant world beaters. I don't think there was anything he could really do, the Preston player, on that angle, in that position. That really would have made me think, I need to bundle this guy over.
But both of the penalties were entirely needless.
I completely agree. Yeah.
The tackle that he made for the second penalty was... He was on the wrong side. It was reckless. And there was like 3 men between the Preston player and the goal. It was absolutely needless, particularly in the box. I mean, I can kind of understand a bit of the thinking. If that was outside of the box, well, let's just stop him now. But I think we struggled. I've sort of I've made a joke over the years that no matter who the managers are at the club, no matter who the players are, we are terrible at throw-ins. We very, very rarely get anything good out of our own throw-ins, and we're really bad at defending them as well. So I do wonder if there's a bit sort of what famously happened with the Chancellor of the Exchequer when New Labour left government and passed on the files to the Tories. They put a note saying something along the lines of, all the money's gone, sorry. And I do wonder if when you become manager of Sheffield Wednesday, you get given the plan for throw-ins, and it's, when we have the ball, everybody plays hide and seek. If you can see a Sheffield Wednesday shirt, you've lost the game of throw-ins. And then defending-wise, it's the opposite. We just let them do whatever they like. And Preston, 2 or 3 times, with the ingenious trick of throwing it slightly past the first man to a second player who was left entirely unmarked. They had several chances out of that, and the last one being when Barry Bannon just sort of stood and watched the ball arrive with his man, let him turn around in the box and play a pass, and then Odebajo overreacted and threw himself at that player. But all these things are sort of knock-on consequences, and it was just frustrating. I do think we look a little bit naive at times. I think we're sort of harrying, chasing the ball, but we almost look sort of freaked out every time somebody does something slightly out of the ordinary. So like that with the throw-ins, we create a circle around the throw-in taker, but sort of neglect to mark anybody beyond that immediate circle. It's just a bit frustrating. So we're 2-0 down in the hole. They scored both their penalties. The first one probably Westwood should have done a bit better with, but penalties are hard.
I thought it was unfortunate in that regard. It was, and this is the weird thing for the game is like we're disappointed we've lost.
Yeah,
because we've given them a head start from 2 penalties that were impeccably needless.
Yeah,
and then wow, I mean, it's probably rare in football that you have a player who concedes 2 penalties.
Yes.
But to come back at the second by the cherry and think, to just look like a man who hadn't learned anything from the first experience, that was the same game, is astonishing.
But then you sort of think, well, what sort of coaching is he getting? It's the same player he's up against. They clearly targeted that side. Like a lot of their forward traffic went down that flank, and in particular their high balls were all between Lees and Odebajo. So I remember playing Norwich when Huckabee was still a kind of tricky winger and probably on his day one of the better players in the Championship, Darren Huckabee. And I remember seeing, this was under Paul Sturrock. I remember Frankie Simek having just constant headaches with Huckabee. He basically had him, every time he ran at him in the first half, he had him on toast. And then the second half, it was obvious he'd been given some instruction to, and effectively it wasn't like incredible, brilliant insight, but it was effectively standing slightly further away. So you let him get his step over, and then then you're in the position to take what comes after that. If you're too close, you're too easily swayed with like the movement of his body or the movement of his feet. So standing that little bit further away, and second half, Simek absolutely owned Huckabee. And that's an example of coaching that can happen at the time. But I wonder about the quality of coaching that's happening, particularly in defence, because Stockley is another League One striker, and he did whatever he wanted today against Tom Lees. If he wanted to chest it down, he was allowed to chest it down. If he wanted to head it, he was allowed to head it. And it's clear, like, that's such an obvious... If you've got that big striker, just put him next to Tom Lees and drown him with the ball, because things are going to happen. Why? But there's ways around it. Not every... In fact, a lot of centre-backs are not 6 foot plus monsters. Some of them are quite short. So there's ways to deal with a taller player. There's ways to defend against them. But if we don't have the coaching staff to give those insights, it's not going to happen, is it? Tom Lees is not going to suddenly know how to defend himself. Odebajo is not going to suddenly know how to be a better fullback at half time. You don't learn a lesson in half an hour unless you're taught a lesson.
But then I know that that's very much in the nature of, we do seem very slim on coaching. right now with Bullen taking over, and then the fact that Steve A, Steve B, and Steve C have all left the club.
Yeah.
So effectively, we've asked, I think it's Neil Thompson to kind of step up from the academy. I guess he's probably doing both. Or maybe someone else at the academy level stepping up in place of, whether it's just a pyramid effect, a knock-on effect of people kind of stepping up in positions. But yeah, I agree with you, and that could be a situation which could be something that's. I think I've heard some noise from within the club that they are looking to address some of the coaching issues. And I mean, and if we're looking towards, I mean, we can get onto this later, but if we're looking towards whether Bullen's going to be the man.
Just to kind of run through, I don't know if this came across on iFollow, but this was certainly a referee that if he was made of chocolate, he would have eaten himself. He absolutely loved himself. Oh my goodness! Every sort of gesture was the most dramatic version of it possible. I mean, at one point he gave a sort of Hamlet-esque performance just to give a goal kick. It was ridiculous. So, I mean, if anybody was going to give 2 penalties in the game, he was going to be the guy. I thought Fox did well in a tricky sort of game for us. I thought Fox was probably the best member of the defensive five. Particularly looked good. He particularly looked good at the left side of a 3 at the back, which we switched to late on. And he played the pass in for reach that resulted in the cross for the goal too.
I think that's the thing, though, isn't it? So we seem to have a big history Wednesday of left backs who were previously centre backs, and I think that's the case for Morgan Fox. I think he did start out as a centre back, so he has a bit of that centre back leaning to a degree. So not damning, and not to the point where I don't think it's means he's a terrible left back, but I think it's just something to kind of keep in mind that he is someone who can do a little bit of that, not to a fair degree.
Yeah. So last week we really sort of gave Bullen and his assorted coaches a going over for the substitutions that they made. What did you make of the subs today?
The subs were, I don't know. So what did we? So Forestieri came on at half time.
Yes.
Well, obviously, I was texting you over WhatsApp and we were chatting about this, and I said, "Do you think it's?" I didn't think, because that was the interest, and just to kind of go back to this quickly, if for giving away 2 goals and penalties needlessly, so horrendously needlessly, then let's be honest, we were fairly even with Preston.
Yes.
Fairly even. I think Preston did dictate the pace of the game more than we did. But then I think in the first half, we had a lot more chances than Preston did.
We didn't have any shots.
No, but I think we were a bit more active in the final third than Preston were. Like, can you remember any great chances that Preston had outside of 2 chances from the spot?
Not particularly. I thought both teams looked suspect from set pieces, but that didn't really produce anything. So no, I mean, it wasn't a thrilling game. It was well contested, but it was a midfield contest rather than an end-to-end contest.
Yeah, I think that's impeccably fair. So
yeah, the only real chance I can remember was Fletcher's spoffed effort when there was a really nice move where Bannon played the ball in behind for Harris to cross.
Yeah.
And Fletcher somehow, I don't know what he was trying to do. It was like he was trying to sort of let it go through his legs, then back heel it rather than just shoot, which is very Stephen Fletcher. And he ended up just sort of taking all of the fizz out of it and just letting it bobble to the goalkeeper stood behind him. But that, to be honest, that's the only chance I can remember first half for us.
Anyway, so Murphy went off at half-time for Forestieri. I had to go back and look at Murphy was a man who had a bit more of a quieter, one of his softer games.
I think that's a nice way of saying he did absolutely nothing. He had no effect on the game. Neither did Kieran Lee, and neither did, apart from that one moment, Barry Bannon. I think we were carrying a lot of players yesterday, which is why I think we needed a change at half-time. I don't think I would have put Forestieri on, but that's
yeah.
I was surprised how long, actually, because I thought, we put Forestieri on, and then I was sort of talking on the way back to the car after the match yesterday. I was saying, it's not really fair because we didn't get to see even if that worked, because we were pretty much straight away, we gave away the penalty. But actually, I was quite surprised to find it was 65 minutes before the penalty. So we had 20 minutes, and he didn't really have any impact in that 20 minutes.
Well, what was the hilarious thing was I watched the game, and I was going to comment that wasn't a very spirited start to the second half at all.
No,
it wasn't really we've had a talking to. We've been, we probably, if you asked us about it, if you asked us directly as players, we would probably answer and tell you that wasn't good enough. But now also we know it's not good enough because we've had a rather stern talking to in the dressing room. Yeah. And I don't know what level of... It wasn't that bad that it wasn't quite the stern talking to in the dressing room, but we needed to pick it up because we're a goal down. And
I think it was more that we just it never felt like it was our game. So it felt like we didn't play badly, but we weren't playing our game at all. We didn't have had very few moments that you describe as us doing what we wanted to do. So although it wasn't particularly a losing performance, it was also, we were just dancing to Preston's tune, and we were doing it fairly well, but at no stage were we the ones making things happen. So that's why I thought we did need a change. My change probably would have been something to sort of solidify us in midfield. But I can see why an attacking change was made as well. And it does feel like subs come from a fairly simplistic place at this point in time, which is, what do we need? A goal. What do we put on for a goal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than fitting into a different game plan, it's just, that's who scores goals. Forestieri scores goals. Rather than a great thought of like, well, this is how we're going to set up now, and this is how Forestieri is going to fit in. Because effectively, that, to be fair to Odebaggio, in general play, he had quite a lot to do, because that change for Forestieri meant that he had no support whatsoever, because Kieran Lee does not play on the right wing when he's playing right wing. He plays in the middle. He plays where Kieran Lee plays, which, as we've previously described, is everywhere and nowhere. So he had no support defensively. And it just, again, it was like, it's whether there's that thinking happen. And my one question coming out of the game was, add all the games together, and actually Bullen's had been manager of Sheffield Wednesday for a reasonable number of games now across his 3 spells. Have we ever got a point from a losing position? Have we ever won a game from a losing position? And I checked. No, we have not. We lost 2 leads late on, in his last spell. So Birmingham and West Brom, we were 1-0 up from early on and then conceded late on. But yeah, we've never gained a point from a losing position when he's been manager. And that is where it starts to get to. That's what you talk about with experience, isn't it? Because until he's done that, it's starting to feel like he doesn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And
I don't know.
Sorry, go on.
The funny thing was, again, I think I was going to get onto this and then went into one of my Harry Maguire turning circles again. I'd get into. So I was watching the highlights back last night. They came up, and I was like, I'll just watch these just to reacquaint myself with what I watched earlier on the day. And it's suddenly like it seemed to, there was a goal, and it felt like, even though I was kind of half paying attention, it felt like it jumped ahead to like 63 minutes.
And
I was like, wow. So there wasn't really anything
from
the second half until about 63, when it was a sustained element of Preston pressure, which then kind of resulted in Adebayo hauling down on their man in the box.
Yeah, he did it properly the second time.
He really went for it, yeah. I mean, you can't really lack the man's conviction for absolutely scything down one of their players in our penalty area.
Yes. So our response to that was to get Reach on.
Yeah, which and then because I'm now looking back at this, and you're kind of in the midst of things. I feel like I'm kind of in the midst of things, and then there's the sheer level of anger about the fact that Adebayo has conceded 2 very needless penalties in one game.
Yeah.
Really converted. He's really being a defensive playmaker, as we talk about on the podcast.
Yes.
So we haul him off again. So it's this pattern which we've seen from last week, which is our review of the sheer insanity at the Den against Millwall, where we seem to sacrifice defensive players for attacking players, because the mentality is we just need to attack more. We just need more players on the pitch to attack with.
Yeah.
And Reach should have been. I mean, as far as I am concerned, Reach should have started. And I probably, if he would have been a halftime, if I thought he would have been a halftime sub, I would have put him on instead of Forestieri.
Yes, that would have been mine one as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then in fairly short order, Atinuyu came on. He did both Rhodes and Nuyu were sent to warm up together, and I'm not too proud to admit that our conversation was, if he brings Rhodes on, we're going to leave, because it just felt like this is a repeat of last week. It's going to be the same stupid mistakes. But thankfully, it was Nuyu who came on, and he had an instant impact. He looked That's the guy. That's the guy I like. I like that Atinuyu.
We seem to get these, and he also had a very telling cameo against away at Preston last season. I think we lost against Preston 3-2 last season away at Deepdale.
That might be right.
I'm gonna look that up while we chat further. Okay. But anyway, I remember him kind of coming on and just having an absolute barnstormer. He scored and assisted one last season, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
And just looked all the, looked like the player we know and love. And I wonder whether it's just this is the situation and scenario for a player like Atinuyu.
He's just an absolute pain in the backside to play against.
And they absolutely, they did consider pooing their pants. Oh, it was a 3-3 draw last year.
Right.
Sorry, that was back in April. And yeah, we were pretty much, I'm going to look at
where the goals came.
Media information, yeah. I seem to remember us being at least 2 goals down. It could have been 3 goals. It's also, I was there for the last time Wednesday won against Preston. That was New Year's Eve 2011, and there were goals from Danny Bart and Ben Marshall.
Oh, perhaps I was. I don't know if I was there too, but
I think you weren't for some reason.
But Nuyu and Reach both showed why they should have been a big part of the game against Millwall, because they were both as advertised. So Reach provided a cross of brilliant quality for Stephen Fletcher to score, and Nuyu just caused loads of headaches, meant that they had to move themselves around defensively in a way that they just didn't have to before. But unfortunately, it was all a bit too little, too late.
Yep, very much so.
Even then, we had chances. I think.
I think after that there was a chance. Did it fall for? I think it fell for Harris. There was a chance that kind of built up, and there was a volley for Harris, which he put over.
Oh yeah, way over.
It felt like if we went in at that momentum, if he absolutely nailed that volley, then that was the moment which we were really just absolutely cooking with momentum.
Yes, and I think Burner had a couple of decent chances heading wise as well that maybe he could have done a little bit better with. He seems to attack the ball well. I don't know how good he is at sort of aiming it, unfortunately, but he's definitely got a bit of that Reader Johnson thing that he's desperate to get the ball, which is good in and of itself, even if he doesn't quite have the quality maybe when he gets there, but maybe that will come. So in terms of there was a handball which was pretty clear from Johnson, the guy who'd scored their 2 penalties in the box.
Yeah, I would have thought if he'd given 2 penalties, and they're also pretty stonewall penalties.
Oh, definitely.
I wondered whether there'd still be a hint of that small, I could even things up a little bit here.
Yeah.
I was surprised it wasn't given for that reason.
It was one of the clearer. There's absolutely no need for your hand to be up in the air like his was. It wasn't really going anywhere, which is the only thing you could say, but that doesn't count anywhere else on the pitch, so why should it count in the penalty box?
Yeah.
So as I said, I sort of came away wondering, has Bullen ever turned the game around, which he hasn't. Tactically, it's interesting. He reminds me a little bit of the first season under Carlos, where if anybody is sort of daft enough to attack us, we'll sort of make hay on the counter, but we struggle to be the ones kind of carrying the hammer. We don't seem to be able to take it to teams in quite the same way. So I remember one of the marked things under Carlos is we tend to win a game if we had just 30 or 35% of the ball. But games where we had 60 or 70% of the ball, we would generally lose or draw. And it feels like we're a little bit like that again. So we can hurt you on the counter, but if you get a goal against us, we're going to really struggle because you can just sit in and you're not going to leave the gaps for us.
Yeah.
The other thing I do wonder is there was some talk. I don't know whether there's anything in it, but I know Sam Allardyce was one of the commentators on the Liverpool Arsenal game, and there was then some talk about whether he might be interested in coming back to management, whether he's looking at roles. And I think he was linked to the Wednesday the vacant manager's slot for in some of the talk afterwards. But I did think, looking at the way we tend to play, I wonder if we're not a million miles away from Allardyce's Bolton team. We nearly always go long. Like, we're always, Fletcher is that centre point, so the distribution from the back is near, and actually Bannon and Hodge. It's nearly always high balls forward, and it was under Yos as well. We were sort of 70% of our passes were long passes forward. That's something that's maintained. We've got, but what Allardyce's teams had was players in the midfield. So if ever dropped in the midfield, they had some good football players in there, and we've got that too. But it's like we bypass them almost always in our attacking. We go straight over the top of them to Fletcher. I just wonder how long people will be patient with that fairly direct style of play if we have more frustrating games like this. I don't know. It was just amusing.
Well, I think I noted in the previous game that we didn't do much play from the back up into the middle. So, not that sometimes, I think also we did let under a lot of Yos. Yeah. And it wasn't particularly charming or good idea. We had a real knack of inviting a whole wealth of pressure on ourselves, and it just turned into some of that negative playmaking that we know and not love at Sheffield Wednesday.
Yes.
So yeah, and then also then it seems to work quite a bit for us, just playing up for Fletcher. We've had a few good moments of some really good. I know obviously previously you've been critical of Kieran Westwood's kicking, but he's had some really good kicking up to top.
Yes, I think Fletcher's the sort of front man that makes kicking look good as well. But yes, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
like a wrestler selling a punch. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just, I suppose there's nothing more to it really than just a kind of observation that we're possibly not a long way from that. Do we want to do player ratings or?
Sure, I think it'll probably be for my turn at least. It'll probably be a shorter one than in previous history.
Well, I wonder whether, rather than last week we spent a lot of time going over the failings in a loss. I wonder if maybe it'd be better just to maybe pick out. Obviously, Odebajo had a horror show of a performance.
He did, and the note I've put down for Moses Odebajo is saying, "Last we will see of him for a while," and I don't mean that in. I did appreciate from Bullen him coming out in the press saying afterwards, we've got a player in the changing room who knows he's let us down, and we don't, we win together, we lose together. Yeah. That's our mentality, and I was really happy to see that. But for the sake of him, I would also wonder how much level of confidence he would have for this. I'd also like to add that, so Odebajo started, he had a slow start. He made an error for the sending off for Westwood.
Yeah.
He's had since then he had a bit of a slow start, but I saw that he was getting better. So I didn't think, and then I thought it was a little bit harsh when he was dropped for Iorfa. Iorfa was seemingly picked for the game against Millwall for a bit more of a physicality. And then for whatever reason, Bullen thought that didn't work. So Iorfa was hauled off at half-time, which was impeccably harsh.
Well, I also wonder how that makes you feel as Odebajo. So you win 2 games, one of them, the second of them being keeping a clean sheet.
Yeah.
You get replaced, and the guy who replaces you gets taken off at half time. So, lo and behold, we're back to you again. But that probably doesn't make you feel pretty, very good, because it's like, that guy's the first choice, and he's so bad he didn't even make it till the 46th minute. Like, where does that leave Odebajo in terms of his sort of
but
mental
again,
state?
but was he though? Because Iorfa wasn't that. Iorfa wasn't bad. He was just a little bit quiet in his first game.
He was the guy that was sacrificed. We talked about that a halftime substitution tends to be a significant thing. It's a statement, isn't it? It's not just a change. It's not like any other change.
It is, unless Bullen's like cultivating in a way that presents it otherwise.
He looks to me like he's not got much confidence. And
Iorfa or Adebayo?
Adebayo.
Because so here's the thing. So, but I talked about having a large squad, and then that's an issue when players are fully fit. But the good situation we have right now is if it doesn't work, we have options to see if it changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I definitely think that I would start with Iorfa. I still think
he's got
the question as to who's going to be the left back. Morgan Fox, I think, did very well. I do get a little bit sick of hearing about, not that I'm at games, but I heard about Luton. His name was booed when it was read, announced the team, which is just terrible. But also, I'd like to say that I've probably carried a similar amount of sentiment for Morgan Fox in the past. But I think the last kind of 6, 8, 9 months of Morgan Fox have been decent.
Yeah.
The end of last season, he was very good. I have no qualms with him being at left back. I think he's a player that the fans forget about, and I know there's been a lot of people mentioning, in terms of like strengthening numbers, do we need another left back? I mean, you can probably say we need another left back if you're going down the route and the avenue of saying that, sure, we need to like improve all players.
Yeah.
And some players are better in certain positions than others. But then, we could play that game all day. Me and you could talk about, let's get an experienced keeper to back up Westwood. Let's get... Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. I can't understand that mentality of booing a player before the match starts. Who does it help? Do you know what I mean? And like what we were talking about yesterday, not yesterday, sorry. Seems like yesterday. What we were talking about last week in terms of Luongo and Rhodes not having a particular impact on the game. It's not their fault that they were picked and put in that position. Like, they are just professional footballers who are at Sheffield Wednesday. So I think with Fox at the moment, there's also that thing that, Liam Palmer is the local lad, and is he keeping him out of the team kind of thing, those question marks. But at the end of the day, it's not Morgan Fox's fault he's been picked ahead of another player, or it turns out actually Palmer was injured, those sort of things. I just don't. It's not helpful. Support them to the hilt when they're playing for us. You can have your question marks afterwards. And by all means, discuss things and beyond that time. But when they're on the pitch, just support the team. It's not going to make Sheffield Wednesday any better to have Morgan Fox thinking, "Oh, great, everyone hates me." Anyway.
He's good. He's good enough. He's a decent professional. Yeah. He's decent enough at left back. He had a good game yesterday. I guess there's the interesting question. I don't know. I don't know in the mentality of football. There's often the mentality which we talked about before, which was going into that third game last week against Millwall. The whole question about whether you change starting lineups, change a winning 11.
Yeah.
And there's more of a focus on that I know there's a lot to be said about a settled back five, a defense that plays with each other regularly. So But then, in that regards, then Iorfa came in, and he's probably lacking a bit of sharpness. He's probably lacking a few minutes.
He was also the one that was supposed to be marking Smith at the corner.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know. I'm still.
I know.
But this is the thing. So settled back fives, but I think within every right, I still think that if you approach it the right way, I still feel that if there's basically errors made from defenders that lead to goals, I think you're within your rights to keep changing it until you get something that works. And then you're going to have to change a lineup because of injuries. I mean,
yeah,
no one would have thought, we see Fox starting. Your first thoughts are basically, I take it Palmer's injured.
Yeah. Well, that settled back five or settled starting 11, it sort of presumes that there's something magical that if you sprinkle time on any combination of 5 or 11 players, they suddenly become really good. In the same way that Alex Ferguson gets held out as the example, every time a team wants to get rid of a manager, people go, oh, but Alex Ferguson was nearly sacked that FA Cup game. You're like, but that then is like, so do you honestly think that every manager plus time equals Alex Ferguson? Because that is crazy. So, yeah, you've got to find the right 5, the right 11 before you settle on them. It's not just a case of going, well, these are the 11 we picked, so we're stuck with it because you know what it's like. Keep a settled 11. We've definitely had times where we've had runs of good results where actually there's clearly things that aren't working, and being tied to keeping the same 11 has kind of so you're almost waiting for the loss so that you can actually make the changes that need to happen. We've definitely been in those positions as well. It's tricky. Did anybody else have I didn't think anybody else had a particularly bad game. I think that's the tricky thing is we lost, but we didn't play badly.
How do you feel about? I think the candidates for the next two kind of bad players. I'd probably say Murphy.
Yeah, he didn't do very much.
But I'm wondering with Murphy whether it's like we will get moments of brilliance from Murphy, or not quite moments of brilliance, just moments of goodness, moments of good,
momentary goodness,
momentary good. But he will be like soft, and he will be a little bit lightweight at times. He's really the starring show. The starring light within that kind of front three has been Kadeem Harris all day long.
But that to me is so.
Did you think Lees was a little bit under the par yesterday?
I think Lees was probably the weakest link, other than Odebajo in the back four. I don't think.
Would you give him 5?
5 is a bit harsh, I think.
Because I think a lot of the team were at 6s. I think it's a real 6 out of 10. It's a real football. It's a real Football Manager 6 out of 10 performance.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say though is I think, to be fair to Murphy, we also didn't see very much out of Harris this game, and I think that's because Preston set up in a way to not let them get into the game. So I think we need to find a way of managing the team that lets us get the best out of our sort of most devastating talents. Like those, you're absolutely right. Much more Harris than Murphy, but both of them are very fast and can hurt teams. And the way that Preston managed the game against us just meant there wasn't spaces in behind for them. There wasn't the flick-ons. So we need to find a way to work those guys into games when the opposition set up to neutralise them. And at the moment, it doesn't feel like we know what that looks like. And I don't, to be honest. I'm not going to profess to be any kind of tactical genius. My Football Manager routine is tending to get a kind of 4-4-2 together and, sign the players that makes that work. I don't like to change very much at all. But I don't know how you make that happen, but it just felt like we didn't know how to make that happen yesterday. We didn't know how to get the best out of the team that we had on the pitch. And Preston knew how to make life hard for us.
Yeah. How did you think about what did you think about the substitutions?
I could see why.
As players.
Sorry, go on.
I guess as players, not like... I think because that's the question about Bullen.
How did they do rather than who they were? I thought Forestieri looked bright enough. I thought Reach looked great when he came on, and I thought Nuyu looked absolutely like that's the sort of Nuyu that you want to have as an option, at least on the bench, but definitely in your squad, because he really he roughed them up, he turned them round, he was pretty unlucky not to produce a goal or two from his efforts. There was one that Forestieri nearly poked through to him or Fletcher that it was, even with the two of them and their slightly sporadic shooting quality, you would have expected it to probably result in a goal if it had sneaked past the defender's foot. So I thought they all did all right. They all probably did better than the people that they replaced. That's certainly with Odebacho. But
Forestieri was a bit more like the Forestieri we want.
Yes. He was playing in the middle, which is his preference as well.
I'm already just doing the weird calculation. So I don't know about the formations and what happened formation-wise. It just seems madness.
Yeah. Well, basically what happened was Forestieri became the top of that three in the middle, and Lee was supposed to be playing right wing. But what actually happened was Lee wandered about and did Kieran Lee, and Forestieri kind of played like a second striker.
Right. There still seems to be lacking a great deal of kind of... the thing I loved about the times, the real honey to the soup, Carvajal times, just the players moving around and the sense of connections between players. Like, this is it. There just seems to be so many stranded, isolated players in different parts of that attacking third.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, attacking half, I should say, really. Just anything above getting into the Preston half. It's just so disjointed.
Preston kept an extremely high line against us, but they pressured us in a way that we just couldn't sort of find any quality out from the back, which seems strange to think we had both Hutchinson and Bannon there. I think it was a strange performance, because I thought,
which is why
they didn't give. I think they stifled Bannon very effectively. He really had to work very hard to find any pockets of space, but that should mean that other players have got more room.
Yeah,
it just didn't for some reason.
And we seem to be a lot more kind of fortuitous and better with the long balls to Fletcher, and then players picking up the second balls.
Yeah. Strange one.
Weird game.
So if you had to pick a Wednesday man of the match or a candidate or two, who would you go for?
I would actually say Harris. I know you said that we didn't. You felt. I thought we saw enough from Harris that was good enough.
I think it's relative, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
much so.
relative to what I think I was saying. It relative to how he's been in other games, which we've sort of said that I've sort of personally touched on a sort of unsustainably good start he's had. No, he was once again one of absolutely one of our better players. I think he looks like a real star. But for him on the high standards he set himself, one of his quieter games, even though he's still really good.
But I feel like the end of the season will be basically saying who is the player of the season will also be which one of the three was his best free signing, which is obviously between Bona and Harris. They've both excellent. So there are my 2 sevens, I think, in a game of 6s and 1 or 2 5s.
Yeah.
Actually, I gave Odebajo a 3. I was just an absolute stinker.
3?
Absolute stinker. Oh, God, it's poor. Yeah, but it really is between Bona and Harris for man of the match.
Yeah. No, I agree. I thought Nuyu looked so good when he came on, but he didn't have enough time to really make anything.
I'm surprised we didn't get a penalty when he was essentially nearly kicked to the ground when he had that brilliant run where he just way in.
He gets those though, does he?
No, I guess not. But I thought that was a foul. I'm like, I was surprised that wasn't given.
It's like a weird form. Racism is not the word, but like a sizeist thing, because I always happen to Peter Crouch as well. It's like if you're above 6'5" and a centre forward, you enter this sort of parallel universe where you can only foul and you can never be fouled.
Yes. Yep.
It's so strange. Because things happen to Atinuyu on the football pitch that no other player would ever get, it would ever be a question of whether it was a foul or not.
Exactly. So it becomes an element of like, oh, he can take it because of size, which isn't what a foul should be. Not one of the
rules of football, is it?
No. It's not like if James O'Connor lightly grazed Nikola Zigic, trying to think of some kind of height perspective here. It's not like that. It's not like
no, there's no allowance for that in the rules.
Yeah,
there's not. Yeah, so a penalty may be awarded for impediment to a clear goal scoring opportunity, and then clause A of that rule is unless you're a big lad.
Unless you're a big lad. In which case you can take it, you lanky twats.
Exactly. What's the weather like up there? Oh,
open bracket, we all hate you because you're tall. I bet you don't struggle with the opposite sex. I bet women want to climb you like a mountain, like Jason Momoa.
Something about shoe size.
Yeah, I bet you've got a big wang. All that stuff. But yeah, I wonder if I tried to kind of put across the world's ire against tall people, but maybe a little bit of my own ire against tall people came in there.
Yeah. Well, I fully feel it when it's other tall players against us, but I feel very protective of Atinuyu, the big lummox that he is. So there you go. Bit of a frustrating day at the office. It's another one of those where had we scored like 5 minutes earlier, even we might well have got something as well. It's just, as you sort of touched on, the momentum is so important in those sort of games. It's always frustrating when we've done basically nothing for 80 minutes of the 90, and then for 10 minutes we look like absolute world beaters, and you're just like, why couldn't we do this at any stage previously? It's always frustrating when that happens, but it happens all the time. We've been the other side of that so often as well, where it just looked like we could do whatever we liked, and then they get some little. Sometimes it's just a tiny thing, like a tackle or 50-50 goes your way, and the momentum's just swung entirely, and their crowd's up, and we become nervous. It's a fun game. It's a fun game. Do you have any other thoughts for today? Do we want to talk a bit about Bullen and the role? Or
I thought that was it. We seem to, while we're doing rewards for players, and it does end up a lot of the time looking towards Lee Bullen, and I'm wondering how this kind of fares in his in the confidence of Wednesdayites that he is the man for the job, how we feel about him, all this stuff kind of comes to mind.
Maybe, as we touched on, the part of the answer is getting enough support there that we've actually got coaching staff to do everything. I think that's good. Coaches can see their weaknesses, and they can bring people in that fill the gaps for them. Probably goes for all sorts of jobs. In fact, good managers are people that know actually they've got there's a limit to their skill set, and in certain areas they're deficient and they need support in those areas. Because that was the thing with Sturrock, who was a striker himself. He knew that the kind of dark arts of defending were not things that he was steeped in quite the same way. So he had defensive coaches to see us through that side of things. So it's whether there's generic coaches that can come in and fill those gaps, or whether Bully's more involved and actually is able to go, well, actually, if I'm going to do this job, I need some help here.
But again, we're not really buoyed by tactics and substitutions. Right?
No. But then in some ways, we've had a good start. We've had the best start for quite some years.
I know.
It's my worry is our wins have been against teams that everybody's going to beat, or most people are going to beat.
Yeah,
I think we'll know a lot more. We've got a harder run coming up, haven't we? Including playing Leeds. We'll know a lot more the other side of that, but then in some ways there's a big chunk of the season gone, and if we find out actually we don't want to, we do need to make that change, then it might be a bit too late to make that change.
Yeah,
we've got Huddersfield, Fulham, Borough, Hull, Wigan. It gets a lot harder after the international break. I think that's fair to say.
And we've got an interesting, the Carling, not the Carling Cup, the Carabao Cup now.
Yes.
Different Cup.
Everyone's favourite energy drink, Carabao.
Isn't it Elevate?
Yes. Coming soon. With
D-taxis.
Yes.
The case of Elevate will be delivered in the back of a D-taxi.
Oh.
Lovely.
And on that day, our Lord and Saviour, Gary Megson, will come back to lead us to the promised land.
I love it. There's a series of smutty videos called Fake Taxi.
Yeah. All right.
Isn't it funny that nothing's been done around? I've seen one or two of those, and none of them have anything to do with D-taxis.
That is funny. That's weird.
That is funny, because that would be the fakest taxi I can think of.
I think it's a legitimate company, and definitely provided paid sponsorship at a rate which was cognizant of the market at the time. So I think you shouldn't probe too much on these things, Luke.
Okay, I'll get back in my book. Apologies to the fine people. It's D-taxis.
D-taxis, yes, each and every one of them.
I want to give a shout out to Dave and Carol at Elevate. Thank you for the shipment of delicious Elevate drinks.
Oh,
we've all been enjoying it at the Year Round Network, and even Alman Abdi had a few and said, I feel I could almost play football again.
Yeah, he could almost do the sort of warm-up jog up and down the side of the pitch.
And then the striker we signed from Cardiff on loan, who played 13 minutes, he had one, and he said, if the fans would have one of these, then they could remember my name. But I only had like a little bit of one, like a taste.
Yes.
So I still can't remember who he is.
Yeah, no, you just got a little sniff of it. You didn't get a full. Was it a capful you had?
A capful. Actually, I'm just going to take a little. I actually have some here, Rich. So just give me a second. Glug 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 glug. I remember it's Warren Feeney. There we go.
Feeney. Everyone's favourite guy from Cardiff.
Favorite guy from Cardiff who played for 13 minutes.
Ooh, yeah. I love the people that had like fairly disappointing games, but over time their sort of influence and ability grew and grew. Like Ben Sahar was one of those, and
Ben Sahar.
Yeah, Bartosz Luzarski as well.
I love Bartosz Luzarski. He was great. That one goal he scored against Blackpool.
Exactly, but like over time, one day Bart's going to come back. We were linked with him for like the next 8 transfer windows.
And I remember like someone on the Owls Talk saying, he reminded me of Mr. David Hurst. They both played football and they're both humans.
Oh, well, I think we can wrap things up.
Oh, sounds good.
I just wanted to, on this special day, I wanted to send our different gravy congratulations to little Billy Stokes for doing a cricket.
Rich, you can't just go in and talk about cricket, something you don't know about. What are you doing?
Well, I just wanted to give him a match rating of a full 180.
Oh, Rich, not this again. Come on.
Yeah, cheerio, everyone.
See you.